Hey y'all, we're going to continue through Revelation. We're in chapter 17 today. We looked at chapter 16 when the bowls of wrath were being poured out. The scene John is giving us there is a scene Christ being crucified. He is on the cross, and the bowls of wrath are being poured out, and he is absorbing the wrath of the Father. And after absorbing the wrath of the Father on behalf of his people, he cries out, "It is finished." So his work is entirely finished there, and he begins to reign as judge. Remember in Matthew 28, he taught, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." That's Jesus Christ. And he is reigning upon the earth. He is King of kings. He is Lord of lords, and he judges the nations in our current context. John is writing this letter, this series of visions, in order to encourage the saints during his own time, a time which he calls the Great Tribulation. You see that in Revelation chapter 1, verse 9. And he is living through this Great Tribulation with the saints. And that tribulation continues until the modern day, until Christ's return. So just right off, we see as we have worked through Revelation, done the hard work of exegesis, and as we've exposited the text together, we have seen that the narrative of the book of Revelation is like exactly the opposite of the narrative of movie series and book series, fictional, that Christians have come to love in previous generations. Um, and where they get their theology, but that's exactly the opposite of the narrative we actually receive in Scripture. It's something that has been handed down, and instead of going to the text and doing the hard work of exegesis and expository preaching and teaching, they're just accepting the narrative that they've been handed. And it's not at all the narrative we receive in Scripture. So the bowls have been poured out upon Christ on the cross. He has absorbed the wrath of God on behalf of his people, and he now, reigning as King of kings and Lord of lords, is exercising his judgment against the nations. And that's what we see here in chapter 17. Now, let me transition here so you can see what I'm seeing and read this text for you. This is Revelation chapter 17, starting in verse 1. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here. I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And he, this angel, and he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. And on her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, Why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast, that he was and is not and will come. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, one is, and the other has not come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. The beast which was and is not is himself also an eighth, and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are called the chosen and faithful. And he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot, and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh, and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose, and by giving their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God will be fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, reading this just at face value, we read it and we probably think something like, what? It's very cryptic on purpose, right? John is writing in the midst of a Roman government that will squelch any attempt to mail the gospel or to mail any letter that paints Rome in a negative light, which this does, right? So John has to be cryptic. He's mailing this from the island of Patmos to the 7 churches that he can almost look out and envision the churches as he looks across the landscape there from Patmos, and he's writing here, and the 7 churches listed are essentially on the same postal route, and so he's mailing this to them, and it will go from church to church, the 7 churches that were listed at the beginning of Revelation. It's meant for every Christian. It's meant for encouragement, but John has to be cryptic. So when we read this, we have to really pay attention to what John is saying. Now, in chapter 15, verse 1, which is this same sequence of signs, John already said, this is a sign. Don't take this literalistically. Read it as I have intended. This is a sign. I am envisioning this. So pay attention. Think about what these things mean. And he's writing in the genre of apocalyptic literature, which means numbers have apocalyptic meaning. They signify something. Beasts have meaning. Waters have meaning. Hills have meaning. Horns have meaning. It's all apocalyptic meaning. It's all imagery. Luckily, in the text for today, John tells us what he means. We don't have to guess. We don't have to come up with some story about the Antichrist, which isn't present anywhere here, right? The Antichrist, who brings together a one-world government with a one-world language and a one-world economy, system of commerce. We don't have to invent that kind of story because John tells us what he means in the text. So we're just going to walk through this text and see what John has for us. Verse 1. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, remember these bowls were poured out upon Christ on the cross. That's the imagery John was giving us there. They were bowls of coronation, and then Jesus, he assumes all authority in heaven and on earth and begins judging the nations right there at the cross. And in his resurrection and his ascension to heaven, and his people who are on the earth today, they are those who are called. They are those who are chosen. They are those who are faithful to him in this text. So one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with John, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." One thing that the Old Testament promises in the coming of the Messiah is the judgment of worldly nations. Now, the Jews expected Rome to be judged. Now, John's about to flip that here by calling Jerusalem, the Jews, the great harlot, right? And Rome is the beast, which is judging the harlot, and we see that in this text. But the Old Testament promises, the prophecies, when Christ came, they're being fulfilled. Christ is bringing justice. He's bringing peace on earth. Isaiah chapter 9, right? We quote this every Christmas. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace. Like Christ came to do that. He came to establish his kingdom in his incarnation. That's before his second coming, y'all. That's in his incarnation. And John is just saying, he believes that Jesus is renewing the earth. He believes that Jesus is bringing peace, increasing peace upon the earth. He believes that Jesus is bringing a justice to the earth. And so he's saying, this angel, he's showing me the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. This harlot who is being judged as a result of the crucifixion, not in some future date from John's perspective, but being judged as a result of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Remember, John, he's trying to be an encouragement to believers during his own time, people who are going through the tribulation under Rome during his own time. That's chapter 1, verse 9. He tells us that explicitly here in the book of Revelation. So he's saying, hey, there's a lot of persecution, but he's currently judging those who are his enemies because he has the right to do so. He gained all federal authority upon the cross. So come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality. Kings of the earth is a statement that just refers to humankind, right? Humankind, the nations of the earth, those who were charged by God himself to steward the earth, to rule over the earth, to take care of the earth. The kings of the earth committed acts of immorality with this harlot. And those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her, the harlot's immorality. So this harlot is someone who commits immoral acts, someone who is against God, someone who revels in her immorality. Now, beyond that, we don't yet see the identity of the harlot, just seeing that she is indeed a harlot, a prostitute, someone who has rejected God and who lives according to her own will rather than the will of God, right? And he, this angel, carries John away in the spirit into a wilderness, and he sees a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. This woman is presumably the harlot, so I call her the Scarlet Harlot, right? I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names. So this beast is blaspheming God, claiming to be God. By the way, the Roman emperor claimed to be who? God. He claimed to be divine. There's an imperial cult, and John has already addressed the imperial cult in the book of Revelation. So he has blasphemous names all over him. So the beast is Rome. The beast is the emperor. The beast is the imperial cult. So this beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and John's going to tell us what that means, right? He's going to be very explicit here about what that means. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations of the unclean things of her immorality. She is rich on the earth. She gains everything on the earth. And she does it through her immorality. And on her forehead was a name written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And again, we don't know who this harlot is yet in the text. But if this is written on her forehead, like this is her identity, and remember, this is a sign representing something, right? And John told us that in chapter 15, verse 1. Here's a sign. There's a sign. Not a literalistic happening, but a sign. But if she's being called Babylon, Israel's great enemy in the Old Testament, Babylon who overtook the earth, Babylon who worshipped idols in the Old Testament, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth, like she's the source of the immorality on planet Earth and humanity that exists, during Christ's time as Christ is being crucified. She is the reason Christ is crucified and that the whole earth blasphemes the name of God. It's because of this harlot. And John, he sees this harlot, the scarlet harlot, drunk with the blood of the saints. So she is the one who put the saints to death. We read in the Old Testament, we begin to get a sense here of who the harlot is, right? Because you read through the Old Testament, and John is very literary inclined. He is referring constantly to the Old Testament, the happenings of the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, who put the saints to death? Primarily it was Jerusalem who killed the prophets. Even Jesus, when he was teaching, Jerusalem who killed the prophets. And Jesus makes that known in his own teaching. So John here, I think, is in the same vein. So we begin to see the identity of the Scarlet Harlot as perhaps Jerusalem. So this Scarlet Harlot is drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Well, what was the Apostle Paul doing? Before he became a Christian, before he met Christ on the road to Damascus, he was persecuting Christians. He was throwing them in prison. He was vying for their crucifixion. And Jerusalem was somehow persuading Rome to crucify Christians. And that's where the persecution of Christians began, not just with Rome, but with Jerusalem's persistence in asking Rome to crucify Christians, beginning with Christ himself, right? And when John sees her, the Scarlet Harlot, he wonders greatly. And this angel says to him, "Why do you wonder?" Like, why is this such a mystery to you? Why do you have to think that hard about this? And the angel goes, I'm going to tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her. Well, praise the Lord for that, right? Because if that's all we had to go on, man, it's like there would be so many different interpretations of the book of Revelation that we wouldn't be able to discern or decipher truth from fiction about the book, and we wouldn't be able to figure out what it means. Oh, we are in that predicament because people don't read past verse 7, right? So this angel is going to tell John what the symbol means, what the sign means. So he starts out here, the beast that you saw. Well, this doesn't get any less cryptic, does it? The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come out of the abyss and go to destruction. Well, who came out of the abyss? Rome. You read the Aeneid, the legendary founding of the city of Rome, right? Rome came out of the sea. The sea is the imagery in Revelation that is always associated with Rome and the beasts for that reason. Like John could have picked up this book, the Aeneid, off a bookshelf in the first century and read about the founding of Rome, the legendary founding of Rome. So that's what he's referring to here. Rome is about to come out of the abyss associated with Rome again, the abyss associated with where the beast will come from in all of this imagery in Revelation, and he will go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast. And he was and is not and will come. So they will wonder as like a sense of awe, like, look at this great kingdom of the earth. Wow. Look at everything we get to do now. Look at how great the Roman Empire is. Look at how cool this is. And all these new roads, wow, and these new riches and new opportunities to do commerce. Wow, what a wonderful thing. So those who have not been written in the Lamb's Book of Life from the foundation of the world, right? They will get caught up, raptured in the glory of a nationalistic identity, which we've already seen in the book of Rome. This happened in Rome. This happens in America. This happens in England. This happens across the world, right? People get wrapped up in nationalistic identities because of everything that nations can provide. Like they are in awe and in wonder of the state. Find their identity in the state. Idolize the state rather than turning to Christ. And what's John's reason for them doing that here? Well, they basically don't have any authority higher than the state because their names have not been written in the Lamb's Book of Life from the foundation of the world. They do not belong to Christ. And the angel continues, here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Okay, not any less cryptic. John, can we be a little clearer about what you're talking about? And they are 7 kings. So these 7 heads, the 7 mountains are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. So futurists will say, oh, this is referring to an antichrist, right? Someone in a line of kings, someone yet to come. And preterists will see this as the rulers, the emperors of Rome in sequence, right? Especially those who think that Revelation is written in the 60s AD. It will say that this one yet to come is Nero, right? And Nero is coming. It's under Nero that the church will be persecuted very heavily, under Nero that Jerusalem will be sacked and defeated, right? So preterists read it that way. But I think the language here really is apocalyptic in nature, right? 7 heads or 7 mountains are on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 7 is the number of completion. 5 kings have fallen, 1 is, so we're on the 6th king. 6 is the number of sin, the number of incompletion, and the perfect number of kings is not yet come. When he comes, he must remain a little while. So John is giving a sequence of persecution throughout the history of the world, right? From the crucifixion of Christ onward. And he's saying, look, the governments of the world, particularly with Rome in view, right, they will persist a little while longer. In fact, we haven't reached the climax of worldly kingdoms yet, upon which they will be finally judged, right? And I think that's going to happen at the return of Christ, right? So there's some future here, but most of it is not. The beast, which was and is not, is himself also an 8th. And is one of the 7 and goes to destruction. And 8 is the number of resurrection in apocalyptic literature. So he will be raised, and when he is raised, he will go to destruction. What's the narrative we've seen so far? The beast, Rome, is eventually going to be destroyed. He was, and he is not, right? So Rome will be destroyed, and then it will not be, and then he will be raised. He's also an 8th. This is where people get like the resurrection of the Antichrist, which isn't represented here. The beast isn't the Antichrist. It's Rome or the emperor or the imperial cult, right? And so in some way, Rome will be raised, but he won't be raised to rule over the earth again. Like people think, oh, the Antichrist is going to be raised in some way and then rule over the earth, build a one world government, which the only one world government we see in the book of Revelation is Christ's, not any kingdom of the world. When this beast is raised, he's being raised to destruction. He's not being raised to rule anymore, not being raised with authority. He's being raised to destruction, right? And the 10 horns, which you saw, are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. So you think, how do you have 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they have authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour, so they exist concurrently with the beast, Rome, but they're kings without authority. How do you have this? And you just think about the way the Roman government was set up and the way they governed the territories they took over, right? They let the national people there govern themselves. And so the national people there, and the Jews, had King Herod, right? So if you've read the Bible, you know about King Herod. King Herod really had no authority except that authority which was given to him by Rome. So he wasn't actually ruling. Rome was ruling. Rome was governing. Pilate had authority over Herod, right? And this type of authority was true for all of the provinces that Rome controlled, that Rome governed, had authority over. So Rome was the king with authority. The emperor was the king with authority. And these other kings of the other nations, they had no authority to rule, but they received authority with the beast for 1 hour, which is a temporary period of time, right? Now, 10 is a number for fullness in apocalyptic literature. And so it's just talking about all the kings under Rome. All the kings under Rome had temporary authority, according to Rome's say-so, but they didn't actually have a kingdom of their own. People reading this in the first century would be like, oh, of course that's what John's talking about. But we don't get that because it's not the world we live in anymore. Why? Because Christ has judged these kingdoms. Christ has judged Rome. He's judged Jerusalem. So these kingdoms under the authority and rule of Rome, they will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. Okay. So this isn't the narrative that we hear either. Here, the narrative we hear in the majority goes something like this. The world will get worse and worse. The kingdoms of the earth will rebel against God more and more and more. People will get more and more immoral, and people will win against the church more and more. Persecution will increase, and tribulation will increase upon the earth more and more and more until the moment of the rapture and then the pouring out of God's wrath upon them. That's the narrative we hear, okay? But look at the narrative in the Bible. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. There's no series of things getting worse and worse. There's not intensifying tribulation until the end, or persecution until the end. There's tribulation and persecution, no doubt, but not intensifying, according to the Scriptures. Not getting worse and worse. The kingdoms of the world do not win against the church more and more and more, or squelch the church more and more and more. Instead, what happens? Well, they wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb overcomes them. That's it. Why does the Lamb just overcome them? Because he is Lord of Lords. Because he is King of Kings. It's like in Matthew chapter 28, Jesus reveals that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him. And that's why we make disciples of all nations, right? Because we know that Christ wins and will continue to win, and he cannot lose, and the church will not be defeated, and the gates of hell will not prevail against the kingdom of Christ. It's like that's the biblical narrative, not something different, right? And those who are with him are called the chosen and the faithful. They're the ones Christ has called. They are the ones the Father has elected from before the foundation of the world, those written in the Lamb's book of life, and they are the ones who remain faithful to Christ because of their election, because of their calling. And we are victorious upon the earth. We are not a defeated people. We are not a defeatist people. We are optimistic and encouraged, and we are able to edify and work for the progress and good of the world. Why? Because Christ is King of Kings, and he is Lord of Lords, contrary to popular teaching today that says the kingdom waits for a future time. No, it is now, as a result of his crucifixion and resurrection, even from the cross. Remember, he said, it is finished. That's the biblical narrative. In verse 15, and he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So the harlot has influence over the peoples and nations and tongues, some kind of religious influence or something that gets people to follow a certain way of thinking, a certain way of doing religion, right? And it's the way of the harlot. And we'll soon find out exactly what that means. And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot. So all these little kingdoms, provinces under the kingdom of Rome, right? So the kingdoms and the beast, Rome, and all these little provinces, they will hate the harlot. That's how you know the harlot isn't Rome, right? Because Rome's not hating itself. But Rome and all the provinces it controls, they hate the harlot. And they will make her desolate, and they will make her naked, and they will eat her flesh, and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast. So again, you see these provinces under the authority of Rome right there, giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. The woman who you saw is here, she's identified as the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, what city is a great city at this time, John's time, and reigns over the kings of the earth regarding essentially the kingdom of heaven and religion and belief? What is the foremost people on the earth at this time? It is the Jews, the people of God. So this harlot is Jerusalem. It is Israel. And Israel has religious influence over the peoples of the earth, and Israel is leading people away from God because of the way they choose to do religion. They have rejected their Messiah. They have rejected salvation by grace alone, through faith alone, in favor of religion by works. Salvation by worship and salvation by confession, salvation by sacrifice, right? And now God is putting an end to that. He's judging the harlot. He is judging Jerusalem. And he's judging Jerusalem by bringing this kingdom with little mini kingdoms under its authority to bear against Jerusalem. Now the beast is sinful and atrocious, right? In God's eyes, it's a heathen nation. It's Rome. And it has under its authority all these other little heathen nations. And in AD 70, Rome comes against Jerusalem. Rome comes against the harlot and makes her desolate, strips her down, makes her naked, eats her flesh, comes to bear against Jerusalem, and burns Jerusalem with fire, even destroying the temple. And God takes credit for doing this, bringing heathen nations to bear against Israel, against Jerusalem. God takes credit for bringing Rome to destroy the temple, because that's no longer the religion God desires. People misappropriated that. People idolatrized the temple. People idolatrized the law. Started using it for purposes God did not design it to be used for. Even later in Revelation 21, 22, we say that there is no more need for a temple. That's why God destroyed it. There's no more need for it. There's no rebuilding of a temple. God destroyed it. You don't need to rebuild it now. It doesn't need to happen. That's not even part of the narrative, right? No, Rome destroyed it in AD 70. And that confirms a timeline for us here. It's exactly what John said was going to happen. If he wrote this in 60 AD, it came to fulfillment. If he wrote this in the 90s AD, he's recounting the story of Jerusalem's destruction. For God has put it in their hearts, Rome and the little provinces that Rome controls, he's put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose, the destruction of Jerusalem. And by giving their kingdom to the beast, little provinces under the authority of the beast, until the words of God will be fulfilled. So when the words of God are fulfilled, he will tear down Rome too. He will end their control over all the provinces when his words, when his will is fulfilled. And the woman who you saw, the great city which reigns over the king of the earth, this is Jerusalem. Now, this narrative is going to be pretty different from the narrative that we hear all the time. But it is the narrative of the Bible. It is the narrative that God has placed before us through John the Elder, as he wrote to the 7 churches that are listed at the beginning of the book of Revelation, and we get to benefit from that. The narrative is not bizarre, it's not weird, and we can read the historical account and see that God has fulfilled exactly what he said he would do. There's not some future one world government led by the Antichrist that Christians should fear, or that anyone should fear. And Christ is currently judging the nations of the world. And I think as we observe the way that the nations of the world operate and interact with one another, and the way the church actually does now influence like most of the kingdoms of the world, I think we can see all of this coming to bear in our time, and we'll see it come to bear more and more as the world moves forward, as the world progresses. Like Christ really is renewing the world. He really is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and we should confess him as such. Christ is King, Christ is Lord, in our time, not waiting for some future date. And in 1 Corinthians we read that upon Christ's return, he will stop reigning as king, and he will hand the kingdom over to the Father, because there will be no more need for judgment as he practices today. It's just the Bible fits together so beautifully, and we are so good at messing it up with made-up narratives. And I pray that we become more an expository people. I pray that we become much more Berean in our approach to the Bible, that when we hear somebody teach something, we go to the Bible to confirm it instead of just parroting what we hear. That's very important for us to do. Catch you guys next time. Remember to check out the 3C Club by scanning this code right here in the video, or visiting Christoa.com or stillthewest.com, and help me provide these expository resources free of charge in every language. That's right, every language in the world. And I'll catch you next time for the next installment of the Book of Revelation.